Yo, I just watched your short from Franklin Barbecue.
Oh yeah?
Dude, that beef rib was massive.
It was. I know.
The thing was so good. Yeah, but standing in line for 3 hours good?
Oh, absolutely. Especially for a one-time experience.
And I even got an extra rib to take home, so I have double the... Double the what? All right, dude, that's it.
Impressively rising to power in recent years, smoked beef ribs have been dubbed the best bite in barbecue. It just involves smoking a whole rack of plate ribs, which is the same thing as short ribs except uncut. It's smoked like a brisket, except these ribs are much better marbled throughout with fat. There's no like lean flat part like a brisket has. I had the luxury of trying these beef ribs in 2 recent trips to Austin, from Terry Black's and from Franklin Barbecue, and it's really true that this is the best bite in barbecue in my opinion. The process is actually really easy if you have any experience with smoking, and like I said, this starts with a whole rack of beef ribs. I think these are still pretty hard to find at your everyday supermarket, so I went to one of my local butchers to find this. And one downside of this is the price. This costs exceptionally more per pound than the already butchered short ribs at your local supermarket, which doesn't really make sense, but if you're a hobbyist and you want to treat yourself, then I think it's worth doing every once in a while. So these ribs come with a little bit of a fat cap which has silver skin underneath, and like I said, these are really well marbled throughout, so you don't need any of that external fat. I'm using a carving knife to skim all that off, really so I can get all that silver skin underneath because it's really unpleasant to eat. Just be sure to take off a minimal amount of meat and don't create any points or divots that would burn on the smoker. And then I'm also scoring the membrane side of the ribs. I honestly could not tell you what this does because we're not going to eat this side of the ribs, but literally every tutorial I've seen does this, so I'm just doing it to follow suit. Let me know if you know below. Now, most tutorials would just put a binder like mustard or oil on this and then season it and put it on the smoker, but I really think big meats like this and brisket really benefit from a dry brine overnight. You just cannot get the salt into the deep interior of the meat without it, so I always apply my rub the day before. And this rub is the simplest that I've ever done. It's just salt and pepper. Typically I'll do a full rub with paprika and garlic and onion powder, etc., but trying to stay true to Texas style barbecue, I'm just doing the salt and pepper here. I'm just freshly grinding a bunch of black pepper, maybe 3 tablespoons worth, and then matching that roughly with salt and mixing up. This gets applied very generously and very evenly across the meat. I'm also getting it on the membrane side even though it won't penetrate that and we're also not eating it. I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to not season that side. I'm getting this onto a baking rack over some foil and then chucking it into the fridge. And the next day you can see all the salt that was touching meat got absorbed into it. Interestingly, any salt that's on some fat is not going to absorb in. But also the exterior has dried out a bit, which is going to help with the bark. And now to my smoker. This is my Big Joe that I've used in every smoking video so far. Just cleaning it out from the last cook and then just leaving the cavity open. I'm just using some regular charcoal briquettes here. They're said to do really well with low and slow cooking and they're cheaper anyway, so you don't have to convince me. I'm also filling my chimney about 3/4 of the way up, just the best way to start your charcoal grill. And now for smoking wood, I think this is an important choice. From my research, all of the best Texas barbecue places use oak wood, so I had to order some online, and I'm also supplementing with some of my hickory chunks because I have those. I'm distributing a majority of the oak chunks throughout, and then just adding a couple of hickory chunks. I prepped all this the night before, by the way, just so I could wake up and start smoking. So first thing I did on day 2 was light my chimney and take my ribs out of the fridge. Unless you're using the fast light charcoals, which are coated in lighter fluid, your chimney should take like 20 to 30 minutes to light. Once you see the white coals on top, then everything is pretty much lit, so I'm going to dump this into my smoker. Distribute that around and make sure it comes in contact with those wood chunks. I close it and give it like 10 minutes to initially heat the empty dome unobstructed. At this point, I just leave my bottom and top vents fully open to let air circulate, and then I'll build my typical double indirect smoking setup, starting with my heat deflectors, and then my X accessory rack, and then my pizza stone for the double indirect, a small and short roasting pan to catch drippings and keep things cleaner, and lastly my grilling racks. And then I'm going to close this and let it come close to my desired temperature, which is like 275 degrees Fahrenheit. I start closing down my bottom vent almost all the way and then do the same with the top. It doesn't take long to settle usually, you just have to play with the vents until you get comfortable with how your grill works. But I'll get my meter probe into the thickest part of the meat so I can wirelessly monitor it throughout the cook. For the ribs, I want them to end up at 203 Fahrenheit, so that's what I'm going to set it to. So that basically goes on the grill until it reaches that temperature. I don't do any wrapping throughout the process for these, I just don't think they need it. The only thing I do is come in about every hour and spritz them with a mixture of half water and half apple cider vinegar. That just creates steam, which will help the bark set without drying out the meat. And that's really all you have to do. This is the easiest thing that I've smoked so far. After about 4 hours, this is sitting at 185 Fahrenheit. You can see a dark bark forming and that this is really juicy inside. The meat is pulling back off the bones, all really good signs for a good smoke. And I would have just left these here at this temperature, but I had to go to judo class and I didn't feel comfortable leaving this on the grill for 2 hours. I think it still would have been fine, but I didn't fully trust it. So I took this off the grill and wrapped it in some butcher paper and stuck it in my oven at the same temperature to hopefully let it finish. I just felt like that was a more secure option than leaving it on the grill. And I didn't film this, but when I came back 2 hours later, the meat was only at 195 Fahrenheit. It turns out the oven temp is actually a little less than what you set it to, so I just bumped it up a few degrees so this could finish to 203. All in all, it took about 7.5 hours to complete, which is a little more than average, but that's likely just because my oven was lower than what I thought it was. Now comes arguably the most important part, which is resting this. You cannot cut right into this unless you want all your juices to flow out. Ideally, this is done in a cooler, but I still don't have one big enough for this, so my next best option is the microwave, which is not the best, but it still works. If it's not already wrapped, you can just wrap it in butcher paper or foil. I'd say rest it for at least an hour, but like 2 hours is even better. And at that point, you can take her out and gawk at your masterpiece. Just that amazing dark peppery bark. And you can tell just by touching this how juicy it's going to be inside. The best way to present these and enjoy them is on the bone, but just cut between each of the bones. But just check out this amazing cross section. Really, does it get any better than this? I don't know what else to say, but I don't know anybody that would turn this down.
Probably anyone who doesn't eat meat.
Okay, true. But I don't think this needs any type of barbecue sauce or anything to accompany it. You can just eat it as is. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Let's pull up a chair and taste test.
Man, I don't know if I'm ready for this one. Some of the best bites of food I've ever had were at the 2 Texas barbecue places where I got beef ribs like this. I mean, I probably didn't do it as well as they do, but this looks amazing and I don't see how it can be bad. I spent way too long taking pictures and letting this thing cool down, so I have to dive right in. Cheers. Man, that is not fair. Immediately off the bat, my bark is a little tougher than what I had at the barbecue places. I don't know if that's because I spritzed it too much or not enough, but it really doesn't take away from this. It's still amazing. Especially underneath, this meat is just so fall apart tender. This is incredible. Oh man. Wow. I mean, is it okay to say this is better than brisket? It's just so savory and so rich. It's heaven in your mouth. I really think the dry brine is necessary because of how thick this is, and you get that salty taste all the way throughout. I don't think just seasoning it and letting it sit on that smoker for that amount of hours is gonna be enough, but this is just an unbelievable piece of meat. Man. And I've been afraid to just do salt and pepper. I've always done a barbecue rub on all my other smokes, but if you do it right, that's all you need. It's insane the amount of flavor that's just inside of this on its own. There's no sauce and no sides needed for this. It's a meal by itself. But yeah, something like brisket is more cost effective and just easier to do for a bigger crowd. I mean, you could reasonably cut these in 2 and then serve 6 people with 3 bones like this, but even still, a whole brisket can feed a lot more and it's about the same price. But who cares? If this is something you do as a hobby like I do, then this is definitely worth doing. I hope this continues to get even more popular so you can find this kind of cut in a regular supermarket. Might be more cost effective that way too. Man, but this is just a delight, and I'm so happy that I made this. So if you've never been to Texas or you've never found this cut of meat, then I highly recommend you do it at some point in your life. You won't regret it. All right, but I need to get out of here so I can eat the rest of this thing in peace. Thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time. Even the guys that don't know what we're doing sometimes catch a win every so often.